Content warning. Paradox Live includes themes of trauma, child abuse and neglect, violence, suicide, death, human experimentation, and gang activity. Viewer discretion is advised. Hey there, heads. Welcome back. I hope you've all been doing fantastic. Welcome to 2024. We are already half a month into the year. That's insane. Time is flying like crazy. And I took a long time to get this video out and worked on. So initially I thought I would make kind of a casual commentary on my thoughts on the anime. And then as I started putting it together and putting together some notes, I realized that I owed it to you guys and also to the series as a whole, I think, to rewatch the anime and really kind of go episode by episode and examine the things that were done well, that were not done super well, and maybe things that were at least internally consistent within the anime as its own standalone series. So with that all having been gathered up, I have come back to you guys now to give you some thoughts. I do have a couple, I do have several pages of notes, I guess, that I'm going to be working off of, but ultimately I'm not working with a script this time, so it is going to be a little bit more hectic and chaotic than my usual videos where I outline, the drama tracks and things like that. I also would like to say I am giving you my opinions on this. You are entitled to whatever opinions you have about the anime and the content therein. You're welcome to agree or disagree with me, and I really invite you to, speak up in the comments if you have thoughts one way or the other. So, with that being said, let's get into it. Okay, so it only feels fair that we start off with the things that the anime did well. So in my opinion, the first episode of the anime was incredibly well done. Now, I was originally joking when it came out with my friends. I was saying like, hey, wouldn't it be crazy if they spent their entire budget for the anime on this first episode because it looks great. And then as the anime kept going, I started having, suspicions that maybe it wasn't a joke, it was in fact the case. Having gone back and rewatched it, the anime as a whole isn't like the worst. It's competent. It's fine. It's very seasonal anime of, not the biggest budget. But with that being said, I also want to say, animation is hard. A lot of people are working really hard. They don't get paid very well. So I don't want anyone out here, to really be begrudging the animators that, there were people who worked really hard on this, and so I'm not gonna be a huge stickler about it when the Paradox Live anime, I'm gonna say, didn't have exactly the biggest budget or anything going into it. But that all being said, the first episode I think looks objectively of all the episodes the most consistent and the most well put together all together, and then the rest of them have really great moments where they look really nice, and then they also have a lot of moments that kind of look derpy. But also, you have to remember that the first episode had a premiere event where people could go and buy tickets to go watch it in Japan. So I'm not really surprised that they took extra time and care to really make that first episode pop off. A lot of things within the series and the storyline were very well foreshadowed in the first episode. I think that the anime did a fantastic job in introducing each of the groups. They did a good job of illustrating the group dynamics, their internal relations with each other. I think they did a good job of establishing kind of the home bases, so to speak, of the groups themselves and demonstrating that kind of setting that they often occupy. And then I think they also did a good job of illustrating their motivations individually, using visual storytelling. I think they did a good job in the anime as a whole, establishing things. Again, with visual storytelling, we had a lot of things that were teased very early in the animation that maybe weren't as blatantly apparent to us until later in the drama series. For example, Hajun's medication for his metal erosion is teased as early as episode 2, and I mean, Kanata and Nayuta have a conversation in their apartment in episode 1, and there's that close-up on Kanata's eye where we see in the reflection that the apartment is empty. That's in episode 1. I thought that was fantastic visual storytelling. You also have the encounter with Shiki and Nayuta in episode 1, which sets up their whole dynamic as well. So these kind of three, I would argue these are the two or three main storylines of that whole first season, so to speak, of Paradox Live. And I think that the anime did a really fantastic job of laying that groundwork early on and consistently bringing our attention back to it over time. I think for the anime as a self-contained story that they did a good job of setting up themes in episode 1 that would repeat later on. For example, in episode 1, we establish the concept of if you do not show up on time for a stage battle, you are disqualified. Okay? Whether or not we really particularly cared for this story beat is, irrelevant, but the fact is that they did establish in the story in the first episode, if you are late to the stage battle, you will be disqualified. And, we had Bay show up in Chekhov's helicopter, uh, which, like I was saying, foreshadows later events. Let's see what else. Oh, I think that they also really utilized current lore information. So things that take place or that are from sources that are after this first season, we see foreshadowed or utilized in this anime series. So, for example, Ryu and his background being a human experiment, which we know now from the Road to Legend season, is utilized in episode 3, where he is reflecting on feeling isolated from others. And also Ryu's struggle of feeling isolated and distanced from other people and unable to connect the way that others do is technically also foreshadowing for a plot line that involves phantom metal being used to connect people and their desires and passions and whatever else, which is again utilized later on in this anime run. Again, whether or not we particularly cared for how that was integrated is irrelevant, but I do think that it was consistent and they did continue to build this kind of they did establish it well, I think, and they put it into the script decently. I also think that even though the Justice episode got kind of gutted in terms of the fact that we did not get any flashbacks between Yohei and Yori, I do think that it was nice that we got a little bit of the Cat's Whiskers content, where it was just the Cat's Whiskers. In the series as a whole, that is kind of like, in my opinion, it's desperately needed. The Cat's Whiskers get shafted so often, and they're criminally underrated as a group. And so it was really nice to see that as well. Another strength of the anime, in my opinion, is the fact that Haruomi, or MC Shura of Buraikan, is a physical presence in the storyline as early as episode 1. And his involvement in the series of events that unfolds is nice, like through, and it's told to us through like visual storytelling. He's not always relevant in the scenes where he appears, but he is present and has something to do with the larger unfolding narrative. So I thought that that was a nice inclusion from the standpoint of the series. And I think that also, just in general, having these like Buraikan memorabilia moments, like showing them or like with their albums and things like that around the world also helps demonstrate to us that again, they were this extremely popular, extremely mainstream group that existed. And I mean, it's been 10 years, so they've kind of faded a little bit, but they aren't unheard of. People know who they are. And I thought that that was a nice visual storytelling bit as well. So here's my list of things that could have been better. Actually, technically, the first one on the list, I this is one that I've heard from a lot of people. I'll be straight up with you guys. I do not feel any strong way about cozmez. I'm extremely, incredibly neutral towards them. Apathetic, you might even say. But that being said, even from that standpoint, I can tell you that, yeah, Kanata's characterization is different in the anime than it is in the original source material. And I can understand why fans would be very frustrated by that. That being said, I also understand, personally, as somebody who's not incredibly invested in the character, why they would change it in the anime adaptation. Because I would say that even people who are very fond of Kanata and his character trope would be hard for them to disagree with the fact that he is extremely what's the word I want to look, abrasive. He's kind of an abrasive guy. He's like an edgy 19-year-old. He's had a hard life, don't get me wrong, I get it. And he has a hard time like opening up and trusting other people and stuff like that. As a result, from like the anime standpoint, where you're telling a story in like 12 episodes, it's really hard to kind of demonstrate this slower growth and slower development of him opening up to people. And so instead, especially when you're telling these stage battle stories in, a 20 minute, time period, you kind of got to hit those beats quick. And so in a lot of these cases, Kanata is sort of, he's initially abrasive and then he kind of like very quickly has a change of heart. In my opinion, this is to make him more amiable or more like approachable to the anime audience, right? Because I do think to some extent, I know from some fans who are also not maybe fans of cozmez, it's kind of makes him a little bit more, again, approachable and palatable because he can be very divisive, I would say, just because, again, he doesn't have these huge growth arcs in such a short period of time in the series itself. And so it can be hard for people to find him approachable as a character. And so I understand that from, like, again, this anime narrative standpoint, but I also understand, again, from the side of the fans, where that's frustrating when you have a character that you really like and are attached to and you see them kind of very misrepresented in the series. I think that another change that really short changed a group was the fact that Tsubaki, the character, was written out entirely of the anime and is not mentioned at all. So, for those of you who don't know, Tsubaki is the name of Simon's late wife and Yohei's old friend and unrequited love interest. Both Simon and Yohei have their traumas rooted in Tsubaki's existence. And I think it adds a lot of this complexity to not only Simon and Yohei's relationship as friends or partners or whatever you want to consider them, but also to like the Cat's Whiskers as a whole. And the concept that Tsubaki left with them, we create music that connects people. The power of phantom metal performance is its ability to connect people. That whole theme was instilled in Simon and Yohei by Tsubaki, and I do find it ironic that that theme is like a part of the scientist theme, like the scientist's narrative in the anime, despite the fact that Tsubaki is not present. But I'll get to that in a second. The only acknowledgement we have of Tsubaki is the fact that there is a flower in a vase on the piano in Bar 7-4 that appears on screen multiple times. And if you are unaware, the Japanese word for camellia, which is the kind of flower that's in the vase, is Tsubaki. And so this flower is kind of the nod to Tsubaki's existence, but she is actually never explicitly mentioned. I think one of the craziest things is that we have that brief flashback in episode 1 of Simon and Yohei attending the Buraikan performance at Club Paradox in the past. But Tsubaki was with them and they just chose not to include her there. So that's crazy. And another similarly related note, I guess, to the Cat's Whiskers characters, Yohei's past with Suisekigumi, was a part of that crime family, is never explicitly stated. It is mentioned that he was old friends with Iori when Iori is explaining their old boss's uh, relationship to Alter Trigger. Yohei has kind of a mild reaction to that statement, but it is never actually said in the anime that he was in the gang and that's why he was old friends with Iori. I guess you could argue it's implied because Iori is a gangster and then like Yohei was old friends with him, but that whole connection is not explicitly stated. And also, their whole flashback of them as bodyguards at Club Candy was completely taken out. And so, if you were unaware or just watched the anime, you would have no idea that Yohei initially was in the gang and left the gang to pursue music because of Simon and Tsubaki's influence. So in that sense, I think that like the Cat's Whiskers, their whole group history was heavily gutted for the anime. Unfortunately, I feel like as somebody who is also a fan of the Cat's Whiskers, that's not a surprise. The Cat's Whiskers and Akan Yasuda both tend to get kind of shortchanged a lot in these sorts of lore issues because they haven't been able to beat Bay or Cosmos in popularity in these like stage battles and things. And so unfortunately, we have a lot of lore content regarding those two groups that never gets any more exploration. And it's just kind of one of the unfortunate matters in this kind of project. That leads me into another point on my list here regarding the balance of team representation. So I've seen people. Okay, I'm gonna. I feel like this is like a controversial statement I'm gonna make. I don't think it's controversial, but some people might take it that way. I'm not out here trying to attack anyone or tell anyone what they need to do, so don't take that the wrong way. But I have heard some people say like, "Oh my God, the team representation it was so heavily skewed towards Bay. Everyone got shortchanged. The original dramas were so much more even." Blah blah blah. And I feel like the people who say that are typically cozmez fans. Now here's why. This is that's my thesis statement. Here's my supporting evidence. The original drama tracks are not evenly distributed amongst the fans. Like the group's representation is not evenly distributed. Bay and cozmez are the groups with the two main narrative threads throughout the entire original run of Paradox Live, so that first season, so to speak, right? One of the big storylines of that first season is basically Ha Jun's Phantom Metal Erosion. The other big storyline is Nayuta being not a physical human being, okay? So those two threads running through the first season influence everything else and all the other interactions between the different groups. Okay, so this is why you have the result of this is why you have stage battles like Pride or like Vibes, where in both of those, Bay is the 100% main focus of those stage battles. The Cat's Whiskers and Akan Yatsura, respectively, basically cameo in a story about Bay. Then you have Love, for example, in which, yeah, technically Shiki is very instrumental in that stage battle story, and don't get me wrong, but he's instrumental because of his relation to Nayuta from cozmez. Even in the family drama, where finally I'm so sad that the anime got rid of the Akanyatsura breakfast scene. That's like literally one of my favorite moments. I'm a little bit salty. But even in family, the whole situation in the family drama hinges upon Nayuta going missing and Akanyatsura helping them to find Nayuta. Um and so you see again and again in this original run that Bay and cozmez are the two kind of main character. I would argue that Bay is the more of a main character group, so to speak, than cozmez is in that first run of the drama tracks. But both of them are heavily centered upon in the stage battle dramas. I don't think that that can be understated though. And so when people are really upset about the misdistribution of time in the anime and how it's so heavily Bay centric, I think that a lot of us who are Akanyatsura and the Cat's Whiskers fans, we're kind of used to it, and so to us it's like, oh cool, we got like 5 extra, frames of animation than we did in previous episodes. Woo! Like Zen got 3 words in and only 2 of them were Waka in this episode or something like that. Um, you know, whereas on the other hand, I think that if you're maybe a cozmez fan, the fact that Bay is the main character or Bay is the main group is a little bit more frustrating to you because it's kind of new to you in that sense. Again, I don't mean to be, I guess, like, I'm not trying to be snide or like petty or anything. I just, those are my actual thoughts. I feel like anyone who disagrees with that statement can go check the original drama tracks. They are not balanced. They are somewhat more balanced than the anime is, but even then, and that just the again, that's the nature of this kind of drama project or this kind of project. I also think too, in terms of the anime, I think a lot of these media projects there's typically the main group, right? If there's a multi-group media project that gets an anime adaptation, there's typically the main group, and then the other groups interact with the main group, so to speak. And so I don't know why people would be surprised that that is the formula here. Um, But anyway, that's my thoughts on that. So on my list of things that I think that the anime could have handled better, there is one thing that I think they handled somewhat better than the original source material, but not great. And that particular thing is in episode 6, Secret. So in the original drama tracks, the Akanyatsura boys and the Cat's Whiskers boys go to a curry restaurant. And in the original source material, the owner of the curry restaurant is, I'm gonna just say, an offensive stereotype, okay? He speaks with this really overblown accent. It's super tasteless. I remember listening to the drama track and going, "What in is this? This is awful." And so when the anime episode came out, I was like honestly relieved that they did not have whatever that guy would have looked like in the anime. Um, but they did put Alan into this kind of costume to work at the curry restaurant. Now, as I guess like an American, I don't have the most experience with like Desi and South Asian communities. And so to me personally, I was not immediately like informed and going like, "Oh, wow, that's like a really tired stereotype and I can't believe they do this." I will say, granted, like it felt a little bit like if he had gone to like a Mexican restaurant and had, Alan was there with like a droopy fake mustache and like a sombrero and a poncho, where it's kind of like, okay, this seems like it could definitely be kind of insensitive, but I don't know, let's hear. And I'm lucky enough to be kind of like connected with South Asian and Desi fans who stated their opinions. And I think a lot of them kind of had the same consensus that this was tasteless. This is this tired stereotype. It felt annoying, right? It just feels like, ugh, this is stupid. I can't believe this is being done. Unfortunately, Japan doesn't have the best reputation in fairly representing other cultures. But I think that the general consensus was not necessarily that, like, oh, I can't believe Japan made this anime where this character is like showing this really heavy handed stereotype of a culture, but rather that the larger fan community did not make comment on it. So I wanted to take the time at least to validate these concerns and to address them to a wider audience because maybe you just didn't know, and that's fine. There's a lot of things that all of us don't know. But if you maybe had like Curry Shop Allen on your cosplay list, maybe think twice because it is, it's kind of an insensitive stereotype. And I also want to thank the people who did share with me their thoughts and their feelings on this because I want to make sure that your voices are heard as members of the Desi and South Asian community. So thank you so much. And I hope that no one out there feels bad. Nobody feel guilty if you're like, oh, Alan's so cute like that. Like, what you don't know, you don't know. But hopefully now you do know and you can be a little bit more aware of things. I think one of the squandered elements of the anime was the scientist storyline. I think that this researcher bit could have been really compelling, especially because Ultra Trigger is this very shadowy, shady, vague entity in a lot of the drama tracks. And having this perspective into the research actually being done would have been a really nice way to build a fuller image of what's going on behind the scenes. Except for they didn't do that. They just kind of alluded to him doing something sketchy. He seems to have somehow made Phantom Metal clones of Haruomi and Chisei. So the younger forms, I guess, of the members of Buraikan. Um, and he had some Doofenshmirtz esque plan to take over the world, which I think was honestly the most egregious part. Um, in my opinion, they could have entirely salvaged. Well, they could have somewhat salvaged this entire storyline by painting it in this way. Exploring the guy's motive, right? Why are you doing this, right? Haruomi busts in. Somehow he's disarming guys and fighting them like crazy. I don't know how Haruomi is like a 17th degree black belt or something. He just like rolls up and just crushes people, dodging bullets, all this other stuff. But he gets to the guy, he asks him like his motive, I guess, and the scientist goes on his like villain monologue about taking over the world and using the Phantom Metal to join everyone into this larger collective and something. He'll be a new messiah, blah blah blah. It's really stupid. Okay, and that's my personal opinion. It's really stupid. I think they could have salvaged it by, instead of him having some, again, this doofenshmirtz ass plan to take over the world, they could have done was just make his motive, I just wanted to see what would happen. We already know that Alter Trigger does these sketchy human experiments. It's alluded to, right? They're making clones, apparently. In the Justice episode, they have that moment where they're looking through like the magazine and it's talking about Alter Trigger. And Iori mentions how they came under fire in the past for doing research into Phantom Metal, and the larger public found out about the negative effects of Phantom Metal on people, and that kind of led to them going kind of underground for a bit. That would have been a good chance to establish them as having, again, these kind of loose ethics around human experimentation and Phantom Metal. And this is also something we know about with the Nayuta storyline. Nayuta is undergoing human experimentation and research trials through Alter Trigger, and it leads to him becoming metal eroded, so to speak. And so with all these different things, I think that if they had just made the scientists go, I just wanted to see what would happen. What are the limits of Phantom Metal? Why not try and find out? I don't care, right? That would have, in my opinion, been a far more compelling storyline for that character. And it would have been consistent with a world in which we know later, after Road to Legend, that there are multiple children human experiment guinea pigs that were used by Ultra Trigger to find out the limits and the effects of Phantom Metal. Um, but that's my little like moment of ranting. Also, did he die? Is he just punched through a window and passed out? That's not actually addressed. He gets punched through a window and then just never mentioned again. So, but potentially he's dead. He seemed to also have history with Haruomi and Chisei, and it's alluded that he might have been the one who killed Chisei himself. Who is he? What is his connection to Buraikan, actually? They just really put this guy in here, gave him the worst motives ever, and then just kind of made him vaguely relevant to the story, enough to make us go, well, do they know something we don't know? And then just killed him off, question mark? I don't know. He's just gone. Who cares? In fact, the entirety of the club just vanishes, which, again, to be clear, that does not happen in the original source material. I think there is some confusion because the fan translations and stuff from that time were a little bit, I think, confused or ambiguous. And so I think a lot of people, myself included, for a while had the impression that it wasn't Ultra Trigger that collapsed, but rather that like somehow Club Paradox itself had collapsed after the events of like the live drama or whatever. Club Paradox is fine. The renovations were not because it like was destroyed. The renovations were because there were development plans in place following the events of the live drama. Um, which again Iori found suspicious because where are they getting this money when Ultra Trigger, the group that was supposedly backing this whole project, went under. But that being said, Club Paradox remains and is just built upon later on. And so the fact that they just had it like vanish into dust was extremely freaking weird. And I don't know what they were thinking. That sure was something. But that leads me to the end of the anime as a whole. I'm gonna be honest with you guys. I like weird anime. Okay, I liked Osamatsu-san. I liked Classicaloid, which I feel like no one knows about. But if you want to watch an anime where like Baroque, classical, and romance composers are reincarnated into artificial human bodies and battle each other with magical girl powers, look up Classicaloid because it's kind of a banger. Uh, it's got everything. But I love that series. Unironically, I found that just I enjoy anime series where I watch it and go, what is happening right now? That to me is peak. So when it gets to this end episode, this final episode, and they are rapping at the anime crucified Kanata on the stage of Club Paradox to save his life. And not only are they rapping at him to save his life, but then in this dramatic moment, Haruomi kicks on the music. He puts on a beat and is like, "It's working. Keep going." I died. I was laughing so hard. I couldn't even be mad. I genuinely was so entertained by that final episode. Was it good? No, it wasn't good. But it was so entertaining to me that I was just like, I'm not even mad. This is funny. Like, I'm not even. I'm not even. I can't even be upset at this. This is just. It's patently ridiculous to the point that I can't even be mad. They just made their own thing up and they went with it. But from a narrative, from like an adaptation standpoint, completely different. Did not happen that way. Not what happens in the original source material. Also, I guess in that last little bit where they kind of depart the original source material and make up their own narrative, uh, you have that bit with Alan and his dad, and I don't even think it was that bad per se. I thought it was fine as far as storytelling. Granted, some people kind of think it felt very similar to Hajun's story, and I'll be honest with you, all of Bei's traumas have to do with parents. Like, they have bad parents. They're like the mommy and daddy issues group, okay? So, yeah, okay, it's not super different from Anne or Hajun's traumas. They all have bad parents. But the big problem that I had with that storyline element being added is that it's just not resolved. Okay, so Alan's dad shows up, tells Alan, "Hey, your music's killing people. Using a phantom metal's bad idea." Blah blah blah. Hajun resolves it for him by saying, "You're not killing people. Your music saved me." That's great. But then Alan's dad just drops off and there's no follow up to it. And even in the last little credits scene where they just repeated the footage from the first episode where like Alan tries to write on Hajun's apron or whatever, I feel like instead they could have just inserted a scene where maybe Alan texts his dad or writes him an email or whatever and is just like, basically, "Up yours, I'm going to keep doing music. My music saves more people than it's going to kill." Something like that. Whatever. I think that would have, for me at least, been like, that was a nice addition. Was it super necessary? Maybe not, but at least it had a nice, little through line and conclusion, and it echoes these, Hajun's arc and everyone else's arc, and it gives a little bit of, something to Alan that we didn't have previously. But they don't conclude it, and so it really just feels like we threw this in at the last second for added drama. Don't worry about it. And so that to me, I think, is how that was handled very lazily. I do also want to comment, obviously, I feel like it's a very valid complaint that cozmez's victory in this season ends up being kind of made on a technicality. And I understand how that's really frustrating because cozmez did win. They accumulated the most votes. There was no extra battle in the original, source material. And so this contrivance was made specifically for the anime. And again, as I mentioned before, it is foreshadowed in the first episode, and the whole repeat of this concept, them running late, and Hajun and Anne ultimately deciding to go after Alan rather than focusing on winning for themselves individually, is supposed to kind of be that final push in this scene, kind of to demonstrate the personal growth of specifically Hajun over the course of the anime. So again, as like a self-contained story, is it terrible? Not really, but as a representation of the events of this season of the drama tracks, it is kind of poor, and it really does rob cozmez of their fairly earned victory in this. But to that point also, I realized as I was kind of rewatching all of this, I don't know that cozmez receives their money, like the prize money, because Club Paradox just vanishes. So I don't know if they actually got paid for their win or not, which is like a huge question I would ask when considering all of this put together. Um, on a similar note, in episode 11, when Buraikan comes to the stage, I also feel I understand that within the constraints of the anime, they are clones. They're like false Buraikan. Um, However, within the storyline itself, all the characters who are familiar with Buraikan's works from their previous, career are impressed and they express their like level of amazement at Buraikan's abilities. However, I think one of the big letdowns of that particular scene is that the song that Buraikan is performing is kind of low key and it really doesn't have the gravitas that I think the reactions would imply. And it also doesn't help that their performance is very much framed in the background of the scene, and so their music is kind of inconsequential to the events unfolding around them. I think this was really poorly done, and I honestly really don't know why they didn't use Buraikan is Back, because Buraikan is Back is such a good song. It's clean, it goes so hard, it's just very good, and I think that if they had used that instead, it would have really helped to demonstrate the fact that these are very talented and these not only does it have the message again that Buraikan is back, this is us, we're here again, and we're performing in front of you, but it also has that extra, it is an impressive song, and when you hear it, you kind of sit and listen and go, oh my god, this is good. And I mean, granted, again, I don't know if they chose to do this because they aren't the real Buraikan, and therefore, they're not meant to be here as a permanent statement, and so therefore, Buraikan is back would be kind of a false move for the storyline of the anime or what. But really, it just makes it seemed that Buraikan was not that good in their prime because all the people go, oh my god, it's just like they were 10 years ago. Oh my god, they're incredible. And in the background, they're just kind of like, duh, 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 and it's very underwhelming. Um, so yeah, I feel like they kind of got done dirty in the end there, and I don't even really hate the concept that they're these clones that were created by Alter Trigger before Haruomi shows up to like DMCA strike them for using their likenesses, but it's just I feel like the whole that last like episode and the two episodes really were just I think kind of poorly executed in a lot of different ways. But yeah. So, as a conclusion, do I think that the anime adaptation is good? Um, I think it's fine. Okay, as an anime adaptation, I think it's fine. If you want your original source material based episodes, you have episode 1 through 8 that are accurate to the original source material, or more or less. They add things, they subtract things. But that's anime adaptation. Here's where I'm going to go on a little grandpa rant to you. I don't know. I feel like maybe some people are kind of newish to anime. And I don't mean this in a demeaning way at all. People get into anime at all different times, at different points in life. But in case maybe you are kind of newer to the anime scene, within a couple years, maybe, anime adaptations historically are not necessarily good representations of the original source material. And unless you're like a big box office, so to speak, you are the long running anime with a big old following and everyone cares about you, right? If you're a Boku no Hero, if you're maybe a Demon Slayer, if you're a Jujutsu Kaisen, something like that, it's become more common for these animes to follow the story of the manga kind of panel by panel. And they might add a little bit of here or there, but more or less they're following the original storyline with greater levels of accuracy. In the past, right? So in my era of entering the anime scene, this is the Naruto and like the original Full Metal Alchemist are on like Adult Swim in America, and you got to watch them at like 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, or whatever in the evening. Um, these anime series that were coming out in the earlier 2000s, uh, anime adaptations were not expected to be the same as their manga counterparts, okay? And oftentimes, right, you would catch up, the anime would catch up to where the manga was, and so they would create filler arcs to give them more time for the manga to come out and be serialized so that they could continue the storyline based on that. And I think that's a big change that we've seen in recent years with newer anime adaptations because people have really kind of become more people want that, you know what I mean? And I've always thought it was a weird thing in a similar way to live action adaptations. When you have an audience that already likes a media project, why are you changing the media in your new adaptation format when you know that fans like the original source material, right? That's a question that all of us have asked about every adaptation ever. And so this is no different. But that's how it is, right? When you look at movie adaptations of books, when you look at live adaptations of anime, when you look at anime adaptations of manga, etc., there's always going to be things that change. And that's just the nature of adaptation. You can never have an adaptation that is like exactly like the source material because it's being adapted to a new media format. Um, so with that being said, for what it is, I don't think the animated adaptation is like all bad. Oh my god, this is the worst steaming pile of crap I've ever seen. It's not. This is not the worst anime adaptation I've ever seen. I think it's fun. It's nice to be able to see the characters, moving around and interacting with each other. I enjoyed the goofy little filler episode they had in like episode 9. It's not serious. Don't take it seriously. It's whatever. I more honestly was more like annoyed by there's like a clear animation error where Zen has his like muscle shirt on with like the fabulous muscle competition on the back or whatever, and then you see the front of the shirt on one shot, and then he's in the background of like the next shot, and the back of his shirt is completely different, and I was like, guys, come on, you know, but it's a filler episode. It's essentially non-canonical. It's like every anime movie that's ever come out. They're not canonical parts of the story from the original source material. And whether or not you want to integrate them into your concept of the character or whatever as a whole is totally up to you. That's how media is. We can choose how to interact with it. So yeah, I don't know. I enjoyed it for what it was. Okay, as a fan of the series, I thought it did a couple things really, really well, and I really enjoyed being able to see these things told through visual storytelling. There were other things I thought they handled really poorly, and the end was comically bad, but it was a fun ride. I had a good time following along with it, seeing what was going on. Some episodes I liked more than others, and ultimately nothing has changed. The world is still going. And actually, we just got announced that there's another album coming out. And God, all those Road to Legend groups that we just thought died or whatever, finally coming back. So that's exciting. I'm honestly hyped to see the new things that are going to come out of Paradox Live. Hopefully they're good coming forward. And yeah, so I hope that you got something out of me rambling at you guys about my thoughts about this whole anime adaptation as a whole. I hope you guys, if you disagreed with any of my points or you would like to correct my points in any way, I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments. I'd really like to thank you guys. I am pleasantly surprised every time I check up on my YouTube and I see that there are more new subscribers. Thank you all to everyone who has subscribed or who's liked a video or commented in the past. It means so much to me. I don't expect to make it big with this YouTube channel because this is an extremely niche anime. But for what it's worth, I really appreciate all of you. I know that I originally had teased that I was gonna do a Shuffle Team show episode, and I do plan to make a video about that in the future. But I was also thinking that after having talked about it a little bit in this video and also thought about it during the run of the anime, I think I might make like a small, maybe a shortish supplementary video in between that just talks specifically about each character's trauma. Because I know that there are some people who don't actually know, and I would like to kind of let people know if they don't want to go through and read through the cryptic hashtags and stuff that are on the original, the official site. So I think my next video is going to be about character traumas, and then probably the next video after that will be Shuffle Team shows. And then after Shuffle Team shows, I can finally get to Road to Legend, and we can talk about those other units. So yeah, I hope you're buckled in. I hope you have a great 2024. And I hope to see you in future videos. Take care. I'll catch you later, heads.